Looking back now, I can tell you the exact moment my childhood ended. It wasn't when my mother died, though that came close. It wasn't even the day I turned 15. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October, kneeling on wet grass in Lake Oswego, Oregon, watching my school backpack land in a puddle like it was garbage being tossed out. The rain was coming down in sheets, that heavy Pacific Northwest rain that soaks through everything in seconds. And I remember thinking how strange it was that I could smell the ozone mixing with wet asphalt. My father stood in the doorway of our house, this beautiful craftsman-style place with a manicured lawn that the neighbors always complimented, and he looked at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before. Not anger, not disappointment, disgust. Pure, unfiltered disgust. Like I was something rotten he needed to remove from his perfect life. My name is Madison Reed, and that day changed everything. But let me back up a bit, because none of this makes sense without understanding what came before. 3 months earlier, my mother Patricia passed away. Cancer. The aggressive kind that takes you fast, before anyone's really ready. One day she was there making breakfast and asking about my homework, and 6 weeks later we were standing at her funeral watching them lower a casket into the ground. I was 15. My sister Chloe was 19, home from her first year at Portland State University for the summer when Mom got sick, and she never went back. Growing up, Chloe and I were never close. That's putting it mildly, actually. She was the golden child, the one everyone noticed, captain of the cheerleading squad in high school, homecoming princess, the kind of girl who could walk into a room and own it without even trying. She had this confidence that seemed to radiate from her, this certainty that the world would give her whatever she wanted. And mostly, it did. My father, Thomas Reed, absolutely worshipped her. He went to every game, every competition, posted about her achievements on Facebook like they were breaking news. With me, it was different. I was the quiet one, the bookworm who preferred spending Friday nights reading instead of at parties. I wasn't ugly or unpopular, just invisible in comparison. The daughter who got decent grades and never caused problems, which somehow made me less interesting than the daughter who sparkled. When Mom died, something shifted in our house. It felt like all the air got sucked out, leaving this vacuum that made everything feel heavy and difficult. My father threw himself into work, staying late at his accounting firm downtown, coming home exhausted and distant. Chloe stayed home instead of going back to college, supposedly to help with the transition, to be there for Dad, to take care of things. At first, I was grateful. I was drowning in grief myself, barely keeping up with school, and having her there seemed like it should help. But then small things started happening. Money went missing from Dad's wallet. Not a lot at first, 20 here, 40 there. He mentioned it once at dinner, saying he must be getting forgetful in his old age, losing track of cash. Then it happened again, and again. Around the same time, I noticed Chloe watching me more closely. She would ask where I was going when I left for school, what time I'd be home, who I was talking to on my phone. It felt invasive, but I told myself she was just being protective, trying to fill Mom's shoes. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was that Chloe had problems. Real problems. The kind that start small and spiral into something that consumes everything. She had gotten into online gambling during her freshman year at college, those sports betting sites that make it look so easy, so fun. Just a few dollars here and there, until it wasn't just a few dollars anymore. She had racked up thousands in debt, money she had borrowed from credit cards, from friends, from her boyfriend Tyler, who was involved with some pretty questionable people. When Mom died, Chloe saw an opportunity. Our mother had set up a trust fund for me, $45,000 that was meant for college, for my future. It was supposed to be untouchable until I turned 18, managed by a trustee. But if something happened to me, if I was declared unfit or incapable, that money would go to the estate, which meant Dad would control it. And Chloe knew she could convince Dad to help her out if she needed it. So she started building a case against me. It was subtle at first. She would mention to Dad that I seemed tired all the time, that my eyes looked strange, that she had heard some kids at school were getting into drugs. Oregon had a bit of a prescription pill problem, especially with kids stealing from their parents' medicine cabinets. She planted the seed, and then she watered it carefully. One day, Dad found an empty pill bottle under my mattress. Oxycodone. He confronted me about it in the kitchen, holding it up with shaking hands, asking me how long I had been using, where I got it. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had never even seen that bottle before. I told him someone must have put it there, that I didn't do drugs, that he had to believe me. But Chloe was there, standing behind him with this concerned expression, saying she had been worried about me, that she had noticed me acting strange, that maybe I needed help. Before I continue, I'm really curious. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you're finding value in this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep sharing these experiences with all of you. The thing about being a teenage girl is that no one really believes you when it matters. Adults hear what they expect to hear. My father, already grieving and stressed and barely holding it together, chose to believe the daughter who had always made sense to him over the daughter who had always been a bit of a mystery. He started watching me like I was a criminal, going through my room when I was at school, checking my phone, asking the school counselor to monitor me. It was suffocating. Then more money disappeared. A lot more. Dad kept cash in a safe in his office at home, money he had been saving for a vacation he and Mom had planned, but never got to take. About $3,000 gone. He tore the house apart looking for it, and when he couldn't find it, he looked at me with these eyes that had already decided I was guilty. Chloe told him she had seen me near his office the day before. She said I had been acting paranoid, secretive. She showed him text messages on her phone, messages she claimed were from drug dealers, messages that mentioned my name. The final blow came on that Tuesday in October. I was at school, sitting through chemistry class and trying to focus on molecular structures when I should have been paying attention to the fact that my life was falling apart at home. Chloe called Dad in the middle of his workday, crying, hysterical. She told him I had attacked her that morning after he left for work, that I had grabbed her and shoved her against the wall, demanding money. She said I had threatened her, that I was out of control, that she was scared of me. And then she said I had confessed to taking the money from the safe, that I needed it for drugs, that I was in trouble with dangerous people. My father left work immediately. He drove home, looked at Chloe's tearful face, looked at the empty safe, and made his decision. When I walked through the door after school, soaked from waiting at the bus stop in the rain, he was waiting. My backpack was thrown out first. Then he told me to get out, that I wasn't welcome anymore, that he didn't know who I had become, but I wasn't his daughter anymore. He called me an addict, a thief, a danger to the family. And the whole time, Chloe stood there behind him, looking at me with something that might have been satisfaction or might have been guilt. I couldn't tell. But she had tears on her face and her hand on her phone, and in that moment, I understood that this was all orchestrated. She had done this on purpose, but understanding it didn't matter because I was 15 and had nowhere to go. I left. What else could I do? I picked up my backpack from the puddle and I started walking. The rain was relentless, that kind of October storm that comes off the Pacific and just sits over Portland for days. I was wearing jeans and a hoodie, completely inadequate for the weather, and within 10 minutes, I was soaked through. My phone had about 20% battery, and I knew it wouldn't last long in the wet. I thought about calling someone, a friend maybe. But what would I even say? My father just kicked me out because my sister framed me for stealing and drug use. It sounded insane, even in my own head. I decided to walk to my grandmother's house in West Lynn. Beatrice, my mom's mother, lived about 5 miles away. The walk would take me along Highway 43, a busy road with minimal sidewalk in places. But I didn't have money for a bus and I couldn't think of another option. I just put one foot in front of the other and tried not to think about how cold I was getting, how the rain was coming down so hard it hurt when it hit my face. The thing about being in shock is that your body kind of goes on autopilot. I walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes. The sky had gone fully dark, that early darkness that comes in October in the Pacific Northwest when the sun sets before 6. Cars rushed past me, their headlights creating halos in the rain, their tires sending up spray that soaked me even more. I was shivering so hard my teeth were chattering. My backpack felt like it weighed 100 pounds. And I kept replaying that look on my father's face, that disgust, over and over in my mind. I didn't make it to Beatrice's house. Somewhere near Terwilliger Boulevard, near a bus stop with a small shelter, My body just gave up. I'd been running on fumes for months, not sleeping well since Mom died, not eating enough, living with constant stress, and now this. My vision started to blur at the edges. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I remember thinking I would just sit down for a minute, just rest for a second in the bus shelter. And then everything went dark. The next thing I remember is white. White ceiling tiles, white walls, white sheets. The steady beep of monitors, a smell that was antiseptic and artificial, that hospital smell that gets into your nose and stays there. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and my throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I got there. Then, it all came rushing back, and I felt this wave of panic so intense, I thought I might throw up. A woman was sitting in a chair next to my bed. She wasn't my father, and she wasn't Chloe. She was maybe in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was wearing business casual clothes and had a badge clipped to her belt. When she saw I was awake, she leaned forward slightly but didn't crowd me. She introduced herself as Sarah Miller, a social worker with Multnomah County Child Welfare. She had found me unconscious at the bus stop. Someone had called 911 and she had been in the area, actually heading home from another case when she heard the dispatch. She had ridden with me in the ambulance to Providence Portland Medical Center. That had been about 6 hours ago. It was now past midnight. The doctors said I had hypothermia and severe dehydration. My core body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. If I'd been out there much longer, if Sarah hadn't found me when she did, I could have died. That fact sat heavy in my chest. I could have died on that roadside, and my father wouldn't have known until someone identified my body. Sarah asked me questions. Not accusatory questions. Not the kind my father had been asking for weeks. She wanted to know my name, my age, where I lived, what had happened. And something about the way she asked, calm and patient and without judgment, made me tell her everything. I told her about Mom dying, about Chloe staying home, about the missing money and the pill bottles and the accusations. I told her about being thrown out into the rain. And I told her that none of it was true, that I had never stolen anything, that I had never touched drugs, that my sister had set me up. Sarah listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, just looking at me with this thoughtful expression. Then she said something that changed everything. She said she believed me, not because she was naive, not because she thought all kids were innocent, but because in her 26 years working in child welfare, she had seen hundreds of cases, and she knew the signs of addiction, of theft, of troubled kids. And she knew the signs of kids who were being scapegoated, manipulated, abused. I showed none of the former and all of the latter. The first thing she did was photograph the bruises on my arms. I hadn't even noticed them until she pointed them out. Dark purple fingerprints where my father had grabbed me when throwing me out. Evidence. Then she called the police. Not to report me as a runaway, which is what would normally happen, but to report suspected child abuse and neglect. She also called my grandmother Beatrice, who arrived at the hospital within 30 minutes, frantic and furious and crying all at once when she saw me. My grandmother hadn't known any of this was happening. My father hadn't told her about the accusations, about throwing me out. She had known Mom died and that things were hard, but she assumed we were managing. She lived alone after my grandfather passed, and while she and I talked on the phone sometimes, it was usually surface-level conversations. Now she stood in that hospital room, learning that her granddaughter had nearly died of exposure on the side of the road, and I could see something in her transform. She became this force of protective fury. What happened next was something I didn't expect. Sarah Miller didn't just take my story at face value and move on, she actually investigated. She pushed for the police to look into the evidence, to check the facts, to treat this like the potential crime it was. And because she had been doing this for decades, because she had connections and credibility, they listened. The investigation started the next day. Detective Ramirez from the Lake Oswego Police Department came to the hospital to take my statement. He was methodical, professional, asking me to go through everything in detail. When had things started? What exactly was I accused of? Where was I when the money supposedly disappeared? Did I have any proof of my whereabouts? I told him everything I could remember. I gave him permission to check my phone records, my bank account, anything that might help prove my innocence. Then they went to work. The first break came quickly. The $3,000 that had disappeared from my father's safe had been deposited into a bank account in Beaverton, a suburb about 20 minutes from Lake Oswego. The deposit was made on the afternoon before I was kicked out at 3:15 p.m. My school let out at 3:30, and I didn't get home until 4:45 because of the bus schedule. The bank had security camera footage. It showed Chloe, clear as day, wearing her Prada sunglasses and a confident smile, depositing cash at the teller window. When confronted with this evidence, Chloe tried to claim I had forced her to do it, that I had threatened her and made her deposit the money into an account I had access to. But that fell apart immediately. The account belonged to her boyfriend, Tyler. It was in his name, and she was listed as an authorized user. The money had never touched anything connected to me. The second break came from the text messages. Chloe had shown my father messages on her phone that she claimed were from drug dealers, messages that supposedly proved I was involved with dangerous people. But detectives are thorough when they want to be, and they requested her full phone records from the carrier. The messages had come from a burner phone, a prepaid cell bought with cash at a 7-Eleven in downtown Portland. The store had security footage. Chloe had purchased the phone herself 3 weeks before the messages started. Then there were the pill bottles. The oxycodone containers that had been planted under my mattress had prescription labels. Those labels have patient information and pharmacy information. The pills had been prescribed to Patricia Reed, my mother, during her final weeks when the cancer pain was unbearable. After she died, those medications should have been disposed of properly. Instead, Chloe had kept them. And when she emptied them out to plant under my bed, she forgot that prescription records are tracked. The pharmacy confirmed that all of Mom's oxycodone had been picked up by Chloe during Mom's final month, and that none of those pickups coincided with times when I was anywhere near the pharmacy. The evidence was overwhelming. Chloe had orchestrated everything: the missing cash from Dad's wallet, which she needed to feed her gambling habit, the theft of the larger sum from the safe, which she and Tyler needed to pay off debts, the drug accusations, the fake text messages, even the claim that I had attacked her that final day. All of it was designed to isolate me, discredit me, and ultimately get access to my trust fund. If I was declared unfit, if I ended up in juvenile detention or foster care, the trust would dissolve and the money would return to the estate. My father, as executor, would control it, and Chloe knew she could manipulate him into helping her. The arrest happened 4 days after I was admitted to the hospital. I was still there, being monitored for complications from the hypothermia, when Sarah came to tell me. Chloe had been taken into custody at Portland State University, where she had been attending classes like nothing was wrong. The charges were serious: fraud, filing a false police report, criminal endangerment of a minor. Each one carried potential prison time. My father tried to visit me after that. The hospital staff, on Sarah's instruction, didn't let him in, but he came anyway, multiple times, carrying flowers and wearing this desperate expression. Sarah told me he wanted to apologize, to explain, to make things right. But I wasn't ready. I couldn't look at him. The man who was supposed to protect me had thrown me into a storm based on lies he hadn't even bothered to verify. He had chosen to believe I was capable of theft and drug use without a single shred of real evidence. He had chosen Chloe, the daughter he understood, over me, the daughter who confused him. Through Sarah and Beatrice, I learned more about what had been happening behind the scenes. My father had been in denial about Chloe's problems for years. She had a history of lying, of manipulating, of taking shortcuts. In high school, she had been caught cheating on a major exam, but my father had convinced the school to let her retake it instead of failing. In college, she had racked up credit card debt buying expensive clothes and going to clubs, and Dad had paid it off without question. She had always been able to cry and play the victim, and he had always given her what she wanted. When Mom died, there was no one left to check his blind spots, no one to say that maybe Chloe wasn't the angel he thought she was. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital total. The hypothermia had been severe enough that they wanted to monitor me for tissue damage and other complications. During that time, Beatrice worked with Sarah and a family lawyer to establish emergency guardianship. My father didn't contest it. I think by then, he was starting to understand what he had done. The magnitude of his mistake. The court awarded Beatrice full custody and made it clear that my father would have only supervised visitation rights if I even wanted to see him at all. When I was finally discharged, I went to live with Beatrice in her house in West Lynn. It was smaller than the Lake Oswego house, cozier, filled with photos of Mom as a kid and Afghans Beatrice had crocheted. She set me up in the guest room and told me to take all the time I needed to heal. She didn't push me to talk about what happened. She just made sure I ate 3 meals a day, that I took my medications, that I felt safe. Going back to school was hard. The story had made local news. Teenage girl nearly dies after being thrown out by father who believed sister's lies. It was sensational enough that reporters had tried to get interviews, though Beatrice shut that down immediately. Kids at school knew who I was now. Some were sympathetic, others were just curious, wanting to hear the gory details. I kept my head down and focused on getting through each day. Chloe's trial happened the following spring. I had to testify. Walking into that courtroom and seeing her sitting at the defense table, wearing a modest dress and looking small and sorry, was surreal. She cried during the proceedings. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a victim too, a girl struggling with grief and addiction who had made mistakes but didn't deserve to have her life ruined. But the evidence was ironclad. The jury took less than 4 hours to come back with guilty verdicts on all counts. She was sentenced to 18 months in a correctional facility followed by probation. The judge was particularly harsh about the endangerment charge, noting that her lies had directly resulted in a minor being exposed to life-threatening conditions. In his statement, he said that while Chloe was young and had potential for rehabilitation, her actions showed a callous disregard for her sister's life and well-being that could not be excused. My father attended the trial. He sat in the back of the courtroom, looking like he had aged 10 years in 6 months. When our eyes met once, accidentally, he looked at me with this combination of regret and helplessness that might have moved me if I wasn't still so angry. After the sentencing, he tried to approach me in the hallway, but Beatrice intercepted him. She told him, in a voice I had never heard her use before, that he had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. That he had nearly killed his own daughter through willful ignorance, and that she would not let him anywhere near me until I was ready, if I was ever ready. The months that followed were about rebuilding. Sarah remained involved in my case, checking in regularly, making sure I was accessing therapy and support services. I saw a counselor twice a week, working through the trauma of that night, the betrayal, the complicated grief of losing my mother, and then essentially losing my entire immediate family. The trust fund that had caused so much trouble was eventually released to me under court supervision, managed by a trustee until I turned 18. I didn't want to touch it. The money felt cursed, blood-stained. But Beatrice helped me see it differently. That money was from my mother, set aside for my future. What Chloe had tried to do didn't change that. I finished high school living with Beatrice. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that probably wasn't entirely healthy, but felt necessary. I needed to prove, maybe to myself more than anyone, that I was smart and capable and worthwhile. I graduated near the top of my class with a 4, 1 GPA, and acceptance letters from several universities. I chose the University of Washington in Seattle. It was far enough from Portland to feel like a fresh start, but close enough that I could visit Beatrice on long weekends. College was transformative. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who knew nothing about my past unless I chose to tell them. I could be just Madison, not Madison, the girl who was framed by her sister, not Madison whose father threw her out, just Madison. I made friends. I dated. I discovered that I was good at marketing and communications, that I had a knack for understanding how to present information in compelling ways. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent so much time thinking about truth and perception after what I had been through. During my sophomore year, I met Julian. He was a graduate student in engineering, quiet and kind, with this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. We started as friends, studying together at the library, getting coffee between classes. He never pushed me to share more than I wanted to. When I finally told him my story, months into our friendship, he listened without judgment and then said something simple but profound. He said that what happened to me said everything about the people who hurt me and nothing about who I was, that my worth wasn't determined by their failures. We started dating seriously in my junior year. He was patient with my trust issues, understanding when I had bad days, supportive when I needed space. He met Beatrice, and they got along instantly. She told me later that she liked how he looked at me, like I was someone precious who deserved careful handling. By the time I graduated with my bachelor's degree, we were talking about a future together. I went on to get my master's in marketing while working part-time at a tech startup in Seattle. Julian got a job at Boeing. We moved in together in a small apartment in Capitol Hill and started building a life. It wasn't dramatic or perfect. We had the normal struggles of young adults trying to make it in an expensive city, but it was ours. And it was built on honesty and respect, which felt like everything. Chloe got out of the correctional facility after 14 months for good behavior. I heard about it through Beatrice, who heard it through my father. Chloe moved to Tacoma and tried to rebuild her life. From what I understand, it has been hard. She has a criminal record that makes employment difficult. The gambling addiction is something she still struggles with, in and out of treatment. Her social circle, the popular kids, and the party friends evaporated once she was convicted. Tyler, the boyfriend who was complicit in much of it, ended up serving time too for his role in the fraud. They broke up before either of them was released. Part of me, the part that remembers being sisters before everything fell apart, feels something when I think about her life now. Not quite sympathy, not quite satisfaction. Maybe just sadness for what could have been different if she had made other choices. But I have never reached out to her. I don't know if I ever will. Some betrayals are too fundamental, too complete to overcome. My relationship with my father is complicated. He reaches out periodically, phone calls every few months, texts on my birthday and holidays. I respond, but they are brief conversations, surface level. He has apologized multiple times over the years, long letters explaining his grief and confusion and regret. He has asked to meet in person, to talk face to face, to try to rebuild something. I've agreed to a few lunches over the years, awkward affairs at neutral restaurants where we make small talk and avoid the elephant in the room. He looks older each time I see him, more worn down. He still lives in the Lake Oswego house. Alone now, the big Craftsman with its perfect lawn feeling more like a mausoleum of his failures than a home. The thing is, I don't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy and passion, and I just don't have that for him. What I feel is more like a permanent distance, a severing that can't be undone. He threw me away when it was convenient, when believing I was broken was easier than examining his golden child. He chose comfort over truth. And while I can forgive that on an intellectual level, understand it even, I can't forget it. I can't give him back the trust he shattered. Last year, Julian proposed. We were hiking in the Olympic National Park, standing on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, when he got down on one knee with his grandmother's ring. I said yes without hesitation. We are planning a small wedding for this fall, mostly friends and Julian's family. Beatrice will be there, of course. She is healthier now at 76 than she has any right to be. Sharp and funny and so proud of me, it sometimes makes me emotional. I sent my father an invitation. I don't know if he will come. Part of me hopes he does, hopes he can see what I've built without him. See that I survived and thrived despite his worst moment. Another part of me hopes he doesn't, hopes to avoid the awkwardness and the reopening of old wounds. I think about that night in October more than I probably should. I am 28 now, 13 years removed from being that 15-year-old girl on her knees in the rain, and yet sometimes when it storms, I feel that cold all over again. I dream about it occasionally, nightmares where I am walking and never reaching safety, where I am cold forever. My therapist says this is normal, that trauma leaves marks that don't fully fade. But she also reminds me that I am here, that I survived, that I built a good life. My career has gone well. I worked my way up from that entry-level marketing position to becoming the director of marketing for a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. I oversee a team of 8 people, and I take pride in being the kind of leader who listens, who investigates before assuming, who believes in second chances, but not at the expense of truth. I mentor young women in the industry, particularly those from difficult backgrounds, and I try to be for them what Sarah Miller was for me, someone who sees potential and worth even when circumstances are dire. Julian and I are talking about buying a house, maybe starting a family in a few years. These conversations feel both exciting and terrifying. I worry sometimes about being a mother, about whether I will know how to do it right when my own family models were so flawed. But Julian reminds me that awareness is half the battle, that knowing what not to do is valuable knowledge. And I have Beatrice, who has shown me what unconditional love and support actually look like. I saw Chloe once, by accident, about 2 years ago. I was in Tacoma for a work conference and stopped at a coffee shop downtown. She was there, working behind the counter, wearing an apron and taking orders with a tired smile. She looked older than she should, harder around the edges. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw recognition and something like fear flash across her face. I left without ordering, my hands shaking, my chest tight. I called Julian from my car and cried for 20 minutes. Not because I missed her or wanted to reconnect, but because seeing her made it all real again in a way that years of distance had softened. People ask me sometimes how I got through it, how I moved past something that could have destroyed me. The answer isn't simple or satisfying. I got through it because Sarah Miller found me before it was too late. Because Beatrice gave me a home and safety and love. Because the justice system, which so often fails, actually worked in my case. Because I was stubborn and angry and refused to let Chloe's lies define me. Because Julian and friends and therapy and time all played their parts. But also, if I am honest, because I got lucky in ways that many kids in similar situations don't. I could have died that night. I could have ended up in a foster care system that was overwhelmed and underfunded. I could have been one more statistic, one more tragic story without a happy ending. The trust fund from my mother, the $45,000 that Chloe wanted so badly she was willing to destroy me to get it, paid for my undergraduate education. I used it exactly as Mom intended. Every time I wrote a check for tuition or books, I thought about her, about how she worked extra shifts as a nurse to save that money, about how she wanted me to have opportunities she hadn't had. In a way, she is still taking care of me, still making sure I have what I need. That money is gone now, spent on the education that launched my career, but the value of it extends far beyond dollars. It was proof that someone believed in my future when others were ready to write it off. The house in Lake Oswego, the one I haven't stepped foot in since that October day, is up for sale now. My father called to tell me last month he is moving into a smaller condo in Beaverton, something more manageable for a man in his 60s with health issues. He asked if I wanted anything from the house before he sold it, any furniture or mementos or items from my childhood. I told him no. There is nothing in that house I want to carry forward. Let it belong to someone else. Let them fill it with their own memories and mistakes. Beatrice says I should try to forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine. So I'm not carrying around anger and resentment into my own marriage and family. She might be right. She usually is. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen, or that the relationship can be what it was. It means letting go of the fantasy that I could have had a different father, accepting that he is who he is, flawed and human and incapable of being what I needed when it mattered most. What I learned from all of this, what I carry with me every day, is that family is a choice as much as it is biology. Yes, I share DNA with Thomas and Chloe Reed. But the family that matters, the family that saved me and supported me and helped me become who I am, is Beatrice and Sarah Miller and Julian and the friends who listened to my story without judgment and the mentors who saw past my scars to my potential. Those are my people. Those are the ones who showed up when it counted. I also learned that the truth has weight, has substance, has power. Lies can be convincing, especially when they come from someone people want to believe. But lies are also fragile. They require constant maintenance and shoring up. The truth, once uncovered, stands on its own. The truth is what saved me. The meticulous detective work, the bank records, the phone logs, the prescription histories, all the boring administrative details that Chloe didn't think anyone would check. The truth was there all along, waiting to be found by someone who cared enough to look. On difficult days, when I wake up from those nightmares about the cold and the rain, Julian holds me until the shaking stops. He reminds me that I am safe now, that I am loved, that I don't have to be afraid anymore. And slowly, I am starting to believe it. The hypervigilance that made me check every shadow, question every kindness, doubt every relationship is fading. I am learning to trust again, carefully and with boundaries, but truly. Next week, I am meeting my father for lunch. He asked, and I said yes, though I am not entirely sure why. Maybe because he is getting older and I don't want to have regrets. Maybe because Beatrice is right and I need to do this for myself. Maybe because 13 years is long enough to carry around this weight. I don't know what I will say to him. I don't know if I will cry or yell or sit in silence. But I know I will go. And I know that afterward, I will drive back to Seattle, to the apartment I share with Julian, to the life I have built from the ashes of that terrible October night. Hey, quick pause here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment telling me your location. It's always amazing to see this community from all over the world. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Your support means everything and helps me continue telling stories that matter, because here is what Chloe could never take from me, what my father could never throw away with my backpack into that puddle. My worth, my truth, my determination to be more than what they decided I was. She tried to steal my future for gambling debts and her own selfish needs. He tried to discard me rather than face uncomfortable questions about his perfect daughter. But I am still here. I am successful and loved and building a life that would make my mother proud. I survived not because of them, but in spite of them. And that, more than any revenge or apology or reconciliation, is the victory. I am Madison Reed. I am 28 years old. I am getting married to a good man. I have a career I love and a grandmother who adores me. I have friends and dreams and a future that is entirely my own. That 15-year-old girl who fell unconscious at a bus stop in the rain, she made it. She is okay. She is more than okay. And no one, not my sister and not my father and not anyone, can take that away from me now. The rain still falls in Seattle, often and heavy. But now, when I watch it from my window, I am warm and dry and safe. The storms can't touch me anymore.